started. Media briefing. Okay, we will begin. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today, where we are addressing a critical issue for Europe's climate goals and industrial competitiveness, the EU's 2035 zero emissions vehicle target, which is receiving increasing political pressure. Last week, the Financial Times reported that some factions within the European Parliament's EPP group have advocated for reversing elements of the 2035 zero emission targets. On the other hand, the European commissioners in their political hearings have consistently doubled down on the need to stay the course. So what does this all mean for the European industries who are navigating this transition? That's the views we'd like to bring to you today. We're joined by 4 business leaders from across the e-mobility ecosystem, who will be explaining why the 2035 goal is essential for their own investment plans, for European innovation, security, and wider climate leadership on the world stage. We know competitors around the world are rapidly advancing electric vehicle production and infrastructure themselves. Policy uncertainty at this time has the risk of Europe falling behind in a global race. My name's Chris Heron. I'm the Secretary General for Europe's E-Mobility Association, AVERE, but today I have the pleasure of moderating our session. We've invited our speakers to set the scenes on the recent political discussions around the review of the CO2 standards and the 2035 target, but to give you, as journalists, concrete company case studies of investments and why this certainty is important, and the risks that these companies see from delaying or reopening discussions for Europe's position as a global leader in sustainability and innovation. I'm joined today by our 4 distinguished speakers. To quickly introduce them, we have Vanessa Butani, the head of global sustainability for the Volvo Car Corporation, Aaron Fishbone, director of public policy for GreenWay, a charging company, Marie Hammer, director of industry affairs for Danfoss, and Christian Hahn, chief executive officer for Hubject, a digital technology interoperability leader in the ecosystem. Welcome to our speakers and to our journalists. We're very pleased to have you here today. A few housekeeping points before we dive into the discussion. This conversation is on the record and is being video recorded. A recording of the briefing will be made available after the event upon request. For all, and I think everyone's doing it, please mute yourself if you're not speaking or asking a question to ensure a good experience for everyone and a clear recording. A rough overview of how our session will look. To kick off the discussion, I'll be asking each of our speakers to provide brief introductory remarks from their company perspective before we open the floor to your questions. Our company representatives will have 5 minutes to speak each. In the meantime, please prepare your questions. Feel free to raise a hand for those of you who want to ask a question, or to put in the chat that you'd like to be given the floor. Ideally, we'll ask all of you to come on screen and give your question verbally, because it's always nice to have that interactive conversation. And so please expect that as a next stage. If that's impossible for you, then we'll also, of course, accept questions put in the chat. We have about 60 minutes available for this session. We will end sooner if there are no more questions. But without further ado, let's start the discussion now. And we'll begin with Vanessa, from Volvo Cars. Vanessa, you lead Volvo Cars' sustainability ambitions, the continuous evolution of its sustainability strategy, and its playing a key role in driving the transition from a century-strong global car maker into a leading sustainability provider for mobility. You have, as Volvo Cars, one of the most ambitious climate plans in the car industry. You were the first established car maker to commit to all-out electrification. Why are you, as a car maker, supporting so strongly the 2035 zero emission goal, and how can it help Volvo Car but also the automotive industry more widely? Vanessa, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everybody. My message is Europe can't afford electrification to fail. Neither can it afford to delay the transition. Electrification really is essential to both ensure our competitiveness in Europe on a global stage and to reach our net zero targets, of course. Volvo Cars, we believe that the EU should remain committed to the CO2 tailpipe emission targets. And this is because Europe needs to be investing in the future and not in the past when it comes to innovation. That's what's going to create the jobs and growth for the long term. So today we're in tough economic and market conditions, right? We all want to keep the European automotive sector competitive. And a few reasons we see there are first, that electrification is really a catalyst for innovation. So it's driving breakthroughs across the automotive value chain. We have disruptive technologies like drive-by-wire steering, intelligent infotainment systems, and advanced connectivity, which are really flourishing in this space. But these innovations don't only improve vehicle performance, they also redefine the driving experience, making it more personal, sustainable, and safe, which of course is better for consumers. And secondly, it's transforming the energy systems as well, right? Where electric cars aren't just consumers of energy, they can be integral players in creating smarter, cleaner, and more resilient grids. So we have bidirectional charging, and electric cars can feed energy back into the grid, balancing the demand and accelerating decarbonization. So as battery technology storage advances, they are set to revolutionize these decentralized energy systems that we have. On average, vehicles are stationary about 95% of the time. So we need to make sure that when they're not in use, they can support the energy transition. We firmly believe that staying competitive means going electric. Global competitiveness will play out on electrification and the software-defined vehicles. And we see currently other regions of the world are leading on both of these. So Europe needs to remain relevant, and to do that, we need to be fast. We can't just keep kicking the can down the road because that will only increase the gap in competitiveness. So we need to challenge, or we don't need to challenge the CO2 emission regulations. That's not the answer. But instead, we believe in focusing on how to support the sector transition. So we think that we should help the industry meet the 2025 targets, and this with supportive demand-side measures like tax or financial incentives. If the fines are paid, it would be better to invest this capital into supporting the sector's transition, which is what we really need. And we need to continue deploying the charging infrastructure, especially fast charging across the union, because that's what really helps make this move. So instead of challenging the target, we think we should prioritize education and skills like training, upskilling, and reskilling people that can help drive this transition, the talents with the right skills. We need to support the battery value chain as well with low carbon materials also, and support AI, core compute, and software development. When times are tough like this, it's easy and tempting to stick to what we know best and what we've excelled at for many, many years, which is a combustion engine. But that would really be short-sighted, we think. So we know that electrification helps both ensure Europe's climate commitments and supports the health of the citizens while maintaining European competitiveness on the global stage. And the 2035 target sends a clear signal to the whole ecosystem to invest urgently to secure the union's economic and political relevance on the global stage for decades to come. We see the stakes are really that high, and Europe really can't afford electrification to fail. Thank you.
Thank you, Vanessa. Staying competitive means going electric, and we have to help our industries get there. And I also noted what you mentioned about ecosystem relying on this certainty too. And that leads us very well to our next speaker, which is Aaron Fishbone of GreenWay, Director of Public Policy. GreenWay is a charge point operator, e-mobility service provider with more than 1,500 public charge points, over 130,000 registered customers across Poland, Slovakia, and Croatia. And Aaron, I'm going to turn to you for what are your thoughts on these latest discussions around the EU CO2 targets? Why is the 2035 target so important for charge point operators like GreenWay? The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting us to be here to speak on this important topic. We are also firmly committed to the 2035 targets and 2025 targets and view them as essential to maintaining the development of the energy and electrification sector of which we are a part. And maybe briefly to explain the business model of companies like GreenWay to help understand, because we feel that it's often not well understood, but it provides context for the answers that we're going to give. You know, as you said, we are an integrated charge point operator and mobility service provider, which means that we operate a large network of public charging stations for any EV driver of any type who wants to use them. We provide charging solutions to businesses and like restaurants, hotels, hotels, shopping centers, commercial buildings, and office parks and fleet centers and whatnot. And many of these are classified as non-public charging stations, but nonetheless support a large majority of the EV charging that takes place. And we directly serve EV driving customers as their mobility service providers. So any EV driver can register in the GreenWay network, receive their invoice and their customer support from us, use our RFID card, our mobile application, and through that way charge around the GreenWay network and throughout all of Europe using our roaming partnerships. So in this way, we are an integral part of the broader e-mobility ecosystem. And as you said, we have 130,000 of these registered customers, and we are operating primarily as our core business in Poland, Croatia, Czech Republic, and Slovakia, where I am based. We have over 200 employees working full time on e-mobility in GreenWay, really rolling out new products, maintaining the infrastructure, developing it and expanding it, and really trying to provide excellent customer support and service to those EV drivers so that it is a seamless experience for them and they can rely on going electric. That's our core business, is what we do. And they need policy clarity and certainty as well in order to know that they can confidently go electric and that the support infrastructure will be there. And that's the main answer to your question, Chris. Policy predictability and policy certainty and clarity is essential for, as Vanessa said, this entire ecosystem to converge towards the same objectives. We as a charge point operator, OEMs, electrical companies, accounting firms, taxation companies, the electricity system and grid operators, all of us can converge in the same direction at our own pace, but nonetheless work towards the same goals. This also provides this clarity and this clear vision of where the market is going, provides essential confidence for investors of all sorts to make that investment and invest their time, expertise, energy, and resources into electrification. And that's really what I want to talk about right now, which is what does it mean to say policy predictability is essential? So for large scale investors, the energy business is a highly resource intensive, costly, upfront investment. We provide energy infrastructure. There are high upfront costs for the hardware that we install, for the necessary work that we need to do in terms of grid upgrades or grid extensions, the permitting and application processes and whatnot. And our investors expect, to be patient about their investment, high upfront costs, and to see that return over the next 10, 20, even 30 years. They need that policy predictability to see that this is the direction the market is going so that they can confidently expect those returns over that period of time. This is not a short-term, quick in, quick out investment for them or any of us. And in terms of the jobs that this investment creates, we're talking network engineers, software developers, customer support specialists, as well as electricians and mechanics who are the ones installing and maintaining that infrastructure in local communities all over our service areas. Not to mention, front office jobs and HR, like HR, accounting, finance, controlling, and other front office roles. And the companies that are making these investments, we're talking tens or hundreds of millions of euros per network. They need to see the direction and maintain the direction that the market is going. And one of the reasons why they're making these investments is because of the stated emissions targets and because of the stated objective and clarity in terms of where the market is going. And they certainly don't want politicians shaking that confidence by throwing hay in those wheels. This investment is also essential for us as operators to make our capital and operating budgets, our hiring plans for the upcoming years. And so if we're not receiving that investment, we're stagnating. There's not growth of our networks happening. There's not additional charging infrastructure being deployed, and we're not hiring people to keep up with the pace of customer expectations, customer needs, and the growth of the EV fleet. This investor confidence also applies to location hosts. We're talking here hotels and restaurants, small chains, which are great places to have electric vehicle charging, but it's not the core business of any of these companies. And for them, it's a big deal to consider, installing an electric charging infrastructure on their premises, to allocating parking spaces for it, to dedicating some of their valuable time and thought space to thinking about this sort of non-core business for them. And they also need confidence to know that over time, this is going to pay off. We tell them, but if they hear different news, different messages coming from the news or from above, then they might, question that. It freezes them. It causes them to want to pause and wait. And this is all valuable time that we need in order to roll out EV charging for the growing fleet. It also, by the way, applies to fleet operators as well, who are using the same calculus. And if they see mixed messages, they might freeze. They might freeze in their place as well. And finally, EV drivers themselves, those very same people who are considering whether or not to go electric. We've already gotten over the first wave of early adopters, pioneers, tech enthusiasts and whatnot. And the next wave of EV drivers is looking for a vehicle, granted a battery on wheels, but nonetheless a vehicle that fits into their lives, that they can conveniently and smoothly transition to without disrupting their life, that they can transport their kids to, on their daily trips and whatnot. And we want to make it a smooth and seamless experience for them. Nonetheless, it shouldn't be a big adventure for them. It should be a relatively simple shift. And as long as we can address the cost issues and provide adequate charging, which I'll talk about in a moment, then they'll confidently do so. But if they're not hearing that confidence, if they're not thinking that this is actually the direction of the market, they're going to freeze. They're going to hold in place, hold on to their probably combustion engine vehicle longer and wait to see how things develop. And that just means that there's more older ICE vehicles on the roads and less uptake of electric vehicles. And speaking of EV charging, there is adequate EV charging. I mean, if you look at the size of the relative to where the fleet is today, there is, I think, one issue of are the numbers there? And here it's really important to look at the amount of installed kilowatt hours per vehicle, not necessarily number of chargers, which is exactly why, the alternative fuels infrastructure regulation has a metric of installed kilowatt hours per vehicle, not numbers of chargers. And if you'll notice, all but one EU member state has already met its fleet-based targets for installed kilowatt hours per vehicle. And and the distance-based targets are slowly being addressed as well, or quickly being addressed as well for light-duty vehicles. From the view of the EV driving customer, there's obviously an issue of awareness. Switching to an electric is actually a little bit of an ecosystem switch. And it's like, the analogy I use is before I had kids, I didn't even know where playgrounds were in my neighborhood. Now, not only do I know where all the playgrounds are, I know exactly which swings and toys are at each playground. If the kid wants to do the monkey bars, we go here. If they want to ride the seesaw or go on the slide, we go there. So once you go electric and start looking, where is the charging? Where are the chargers? You quickly become aware of where they are because you need to. And by the way, this is just public charging infrastructure we're talking about. The vast majority of charging takes place in non-public settings. Primarily, of course, thus far for people who have their own ability to park in their own dedicated parking space and have a home charger, but increasingly in office parks and shopping centers and business centers and things like that. And we expect this to continue well into 2035, this ratio of public to non-public charging. And recent reporting from P3 Automotive said there's a 73% growth of public EV charging deployment from over the last 2 years, 2022 to 2024. And I guess you'll totally talk about that later. So, partly it's an issue of awareness and partly it's an issue of accurate information being used to base market developments on. So I'll leave it there and let other speakers jump in. Thank you.
Thanks, Aaron. So clarity, confidence, investors, consumers, and the ecosystem as a whole concerns at where we're at there. Marie, we'll turn to you next. Marie Hammer from Danfoss, the Director of Industry Affairs, worked across Danish politics and industry over the last years. Danfoss is a family-owned Danish company driven by the vision of an electrified society and powered by the possibilities of digital transformation. So Marie, we'll turn to you. How do you, in your company, see the 2035 zero emission target as a driver for this transformation? What risks do you see if Europe is delaying or revisiting this goal? The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. And it helps to unmute. Here we go. Well, perhaps just a few words on, just to clarify Danfoss and Semikron Danfoss role in electric cars. As you said, we are an engineer and innovative technology company, and we supply solutions to many sectors, from the maritime to buildings, construction machinery, hydrogen, and industry as a whole. And all of our solutions, they contribute to decarbonization through energy efficiency and electrification. So for the car industry, we develop and manufacture power electronics in Europe, which play a crucial role in ensuring efficient energy transfer in the electric car from the battery to the motor. So to the question on zero emission targets, well, it's been said already here, but the green transition needs significant investments. And investments need clear and consistent political signals. So this uncertainty in the policy making only increases cost and risk, and it risks leaving Europe behind in the global clean tech race. And we also see a clear risk that it damages the trust in the political system as a whole. I also want to look a little bit at the bigger picture here, because electric cars and vans, they are more than just transport. They are part of the broader electric system, as Vanessa also pointed to. And progress in this area will accelerate progress in battery production, renewable energy integration, and the grid infrastructure. And that will all form the foundation for an integrated green system that we need for the future. And we can also use the cars for flexibility in the electric system. So just questioning these targets, we can have a negative spillover effects to other clean tech areas, and will challenge this whole idea of seeing it as a whole system. Having said that, we also believe it's important to fully recognize that this is not only a tech transformation, it's a transformation of society, because green policy will also reshape labor markets, jobs, and skills. So a critical challenge in the clean tech remains the lack of skilled workers needed to develop, produce, install, and service these technologies. Aaron also mentioned quite a lot of other functions that we need, and that's true. We need workers to do this. Therefore, there's a strong need for social dialogue amongst governments, companies, unions, and education and training institutions to ensure that no one is left behind and we can fill this gap. So to sum it up a bit, this zero emission goal, it isn't just about decarbonization. It's about creating an ecosystem for innovation where Europe's talent, technology, and industrial base come together to shape the future of mobility and the energy system.
Thank you, Marie. So the system perspective of all of this also to be taken into account. And that leads us to our last speaker, Christian Hahn at Hubject, a leading German headquartered company with now a focus on advancing e-mobility and intelligent networks worldwide. Christian, as CEO of Hubject, you've been at the forefront of building an interconnected EV charging ecosystem. How does regulatory certainty around the 2035 target influence what you're trying to do to develop this interconnected charging infrastructure? What are the broader implications for Europe's leadership in these new innovative areas? The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good morning from my side as well. As I said, my name is Christian. Hubject, what is Hubject doing? A short explanation. Hubject is a company having around about 150 people working for this company already. And we are enabling a seamless usage of public charging stations globally, because we believe this is mandatory to increase the adoption of EVs. Today, we have already connected more than 1 million public charging points on our digital platforms. And also, thanks again for being part of this very important discussion. As Hubject, we believe that the best way and the most efficient way how we can reduce carbon emissions in the transport sector is indeed electrifying the mobility value chain based on battery electric mobility. And we believe that this requires, of course, strong investments. I think that was already mentioned by all three speakers before me, that the main concern right now is about how can we get more clarity on the future investments needed. And why that is so complex is also connected with the fact that our ecosystem, and this term was mentioned several times as well today already, is consisting of so many different companies. So to enable the transition to EVs, we require EV OEMs, car manufacturers, we require energy companies, but also a lot of software and hardware companies are required as well. Startups, mature companies, they all need to work together, and they all need to have clarity on the upcoming future. And that's the reason why this topic is so important to us. Especially also taking into account that one relevant success factor of this industry is the availability of charging infrastructure, public infrastructure, as well as private infrastructure. And we see that this requires, again, clarity on the next couple of years, because this is the only way how we can make it more attractive to private investors as well, investing into this field. Otherwise, it will also require still strong public investments as well. And we all believe that sooner or later, establishing a more mature market will be needed to increase attractiveness to private investors. As said, as we talk about a quite complex ecosystem, we need to also make sure that in this ecosystem, all the relevant stakeholders are able to work with each other, that they are connecting with each other. And again, this requires still further investments as well. Yes, we all know we're already working on this lovely topic since years. energy and EV industry is now running since 10 to 15 years. And I think we altogether have achieved a lot. But still, we also see some comments about customer experience, about usability. And we believe that we need to work on this jointly to make this happen again. Clarity is needed. Otherwise, we will also see a defocusing by other companies because it's less clear on which direction we need to move forward. Last but not least, one topic I would also like to highlight, Aaron mentioned this as well. When we talk about charging, we shouldn't forget that public charging infrastructure as well as private charging infrastructure is needed. I think we learned a lot in the last years how public charging infrastructure, how the business cases behind are working on the private side, so installing wallbox at your garage, but also installing charging possibilities in apartment blocks is slightly more complex because there we see a lot of requirements to be taken into account. Again, we see that regulation is starting to provide more support and making this happen. But again, it's a longer journey. Again, clarity here helps us to make the necessary steps to finalize this journey sooner than later. Last but not least, a topic which is, from my point of view, very important as well, and we shouldn't underestimate the positive impact as well as the requirements to enable this, is the integration of electric vehicles into the energy ecosystem. As said, we talk about connectivity, we talk about working together, and one of the next steps we all need to achieve, and probably is also one of the most complex steps, is how we can better integrate electric vehicles into the energy grid. Not only because that solves some challenges, but also creates a lot of opportunities as well, because we talk about more flexible energy production in the future. And when we talk about flexibility, we need to talk about how to store electricity for some time, and battery electric vehicles can be a great way to do so. But to make it happen, we also need to start aligning our European energy ecosystem, which of course is very much driven by national frameworks right now. This is probably a bigger change. And again, clarity on the future will help us making the necessary steps to make sure that this unification, this harmonization is happening at the same time we see in ramp up in adopting of electric vehicles. So thank you very much. And again, happy to join the conversation.
Thank you, Christian. Thanks to all of our speakers for their opening remarks. For those who are just joining this briefing, we've now heard from some short statements from our four speakers from Volvo Cars, GreenWay, Danfoss, and Hubject. And shortly now, we will be opening the floor to your questions. Some key common messages that have been shared across speakers. Number one, this is an entire ecosystem which needs to be built up, crossing from the vehicles to the charging to the technologies that surround that and more. Number two, certainty is absolutely paramount for making these capital-intensive long-term investments and getting that system perspective of electric vehicles right. And number three, we need to bring consumers on board and alongside on this journey too. And what we can do to help and stimulate EVs will be essential as we move forwards. Now, I'll ask people on the line if you would like to ask a question to our speakers on anything they've mentioned and on the wider debate around the 2035 targets. Please put your hand up. We already received 2 questions prior to the briefing, so I'm also ready to ask those. But Lorenzo from Asker News, actually one of my pre-questions was from you, I think, already. So Lorenzo, will ask you to go first with a question, and then Helena following that. After you've each asked a question, I'll go to our panel to take their remarks, and we'll do them one by one as we go forwards. So Lorenzo, thanks for joining us. What's your question?
Can you hear me?
We hear you well, yeah.
Very good. My question concerns the third point that you just mentioned, that we need to take on board consumers. We know that electric cars are too expensive for consumers in Europe. We know that this has provoked a crisis in the industry. Yesterday, I asked the head of the president of ACEA, the car industry association in Europe, what is the problem about small cars, small electric cars that people could buy without spending, 35,000, 40,000 euros per vehicle. And his answer was quite interesting. He said, small electric cars are not profitable enough for the industry because the regulation, the EU regulation, imposes us some fixed charges that we have to put into the cars. And so it's much better to have big, expensive cars where these fixed charges are absorbed in the big price. So my question is, where is it written that the industry has to make a lot of profit on cars, even when we are in the middle of a transformation and we need a critical mass of people, consumers buying cars? I mean, why are they expecting a lot of money, a lot of profit from cars when we know that we need to sell the cars? Otherwise, we are in the situation where we are now, where we are even putting into question the objectives for 2025 about emission reduction, because there's not enough people to buy cars. We need people to buy cars. Isn't it true? Thank you.
A question then on affordability of cars, a question ahead of a year when we know a lot of new models are coming to the market. To start to answer this question, Vanessa, I think I can come to you first as the car maker representative, and then ask other speakers if they'd like to come in from a broader perspective on that question too. So Vanessa.
Thank you very much. And I think very interesting question. I think we need to start again by looking back at what we've all talked about, which is the ecosystem around it, right? If we want consumers to be interested, and frankly, they get a better driving experience and a much more efficient driving experience with the electric cars, right? But the ecosystem needs to be around supporting consumers, right? So that we have that, we can get to that tipping point where I think it was Aaron was saying, right? You know exactly where the chargers are, you know exactly how this works, so that it's not such a big hurdle to cross to moving to the electric cars. And then I think the point in terms of the cost of electrification, I mean, with continued investment, we see that electric cars are poised to become cheaper than internal combustion engine vehicles, right? The battery prices are dropping, the processes are improving, and the economies of scale kick in. And of course, that just happens the more and more we make this shift happen, right? So we're approaching the point where the electric cars become the obvious choice. But I realize, of course, that this is still a challenge here. And I think that's where it really does come back to that ecosystem working together to make this happen. And here, you know, we risk interfering with the development really if we don't have clear regulation on this. So yes, there's going to be competition in the market, and that will help to push the prices. But I think to me, it's back to the ecosystem and ensuring that helping consumers to make the transition so that we can move in the right direction.
Thanks, Vanessa. This question of affordable vehicles. Aaron, I see you've got a hand, and Marie, Christian, let me know if you'd like to come in too. Please, Aaron.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the premise of the question is great, and certainly cannot speak on behalf of, any auto manufacturers, but just, for ourselves, I mean, vehicles on the market, vehicles on the roads is, an essential metric that we need. As a CPO, we are looking at utilization of our network as a key factor. In order for electric vehicles with a battery capacity of any size to be assets to the grid, they need to be plugged in so that they can provide those benefit services back to the grid. So more vehicles are enabled to do that. How those vehicles are, gotten to the market, whether it's through, the leasing schemes, whether it's through leasing companies or fleet operators, or whether it's, sold to individuals or kind of people is I guess, a different question. But of course, an important one to unlock. But I know the European Commission is also looking at some legislative measures around, fleet electrification, which could really facilitate things, because for sure, especially large fleet operators, are a key enabler of, have a key ability to unlock at scale, vehicles across the markets. And the other thing is, I think it would be really interesting to look at how some of the any potential fines that would come from the CO2 emissions regulation for OEMs who are not compliant, who are laggards, to be put into demand side measures, right? In order to provide supports so that they are, for any buyer to get vehicles and somehow get those onto the market, so that it is a part of the support network that we're trying to build out this whole e-mobility ecosystem here. So I'm not sure how that could be done, but I think it's an important point to contribute to the debate.
Thank you, Aaron. I don't see Marie or Christian with hands up, so I assume we move to the next question. Helena, please take the floor.
Good morning, Helena from Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yeah, speak a bit louder because I just hear you, but yeah.
So Elena Freitas for MLX. Thank you very much for this briefing. It was very insightful. I have one question for Vanessa Butani, and it would be if the EU institutions change the 2025 rules and in the end the non-compliant car makers are not fined, would Volvo bring EU institutions to court? Thank you.
Thank you, Helena. So, Vanessa, a direct question to you, and you half answered in your opening remarks your view on 2035 and supportive measures. I give you the floor to answer or reinforce those messages.
I mean, we are well on track to achieving the 2025 targets that have been set, as well as 2035, right? And we see that as an important part of our business strategy. So we will continue going forward with our work. We see the consumer demand there. We see, when you have great products, you create that demand. I come back to the infrastructure, of course, and the ecosystem around that. But I can't really comment on the development there in terms of the legal frameworks. That's not really my question to answer, but thanks.
Thank you, Vanessa. We have another question next from Patrick. Patrick, I give you the floor. And please, yeah.
Yeah. Hello, good morning. Thanks a lot for the briefing. And I have a question for Aaron about.
Can you just say where you're from before?
I'm sorry. From Poland. Patrick from Poland.
Super.
Yeah. And my question is for Aaron. Could you speak a bit more about the preparedness in terms of charging infrastructure? And I know you touched a bit on this, but this is exactly the point that some politicians in Poland are using to support their opposition to the 2035 targets. Just this week, I saw a video from a Polish MEP walking around one of the cities in Poland, parking lots, and saying, "Can you imagine if all these cars would be EV? It's impossible to meet these targets." We have in the city where he was saying that there are just 90 charging points and 600,000 cars, obviously combustion engine cars right now in vast majority. So can you respond to that argument? Obviously, you know the Polish market, so if you can speak a bit more on that. Thank you.
Aaron, we turn to you, and then maybe Christian could come in afterwards on general comments on preparedness and what you see, Christian, in your business around Europe with what you're doing too. So, Aaron, direct answer. You are on mute, Aaron, if you're speaking.
Yes, hi. I mean, of course, the answer matters in all, the local context matters, right? And local conditions matter. And as I said before, that the vast majority of charging is done in private settings, not in public settings. So we should keep it today as well as into the future. So we need to keep that in mind. Also, it is essential to look in terms of installed kilowatts per vehicle available in any given area, not just the number of charging stations. Yeah, there's low-powered charging stations, right? There's high-powered charging stations. There's ultra high-powered charging stations, and all of these are able to serve different vehicles over a different period of time, with other different considerations involved as well. So yeah, sure. I mean, Poland is a early stage market. Right. There are 80,000 BEVs in Poland right now only, in a country of, 18 million vehicles or something. So, I mean, it is still a very, still less than 1% of the overall vehicle fleet. So, of course, you need to be looking for those EV charging stations in order to find them, or go to places where they are. They're not in every parking lot. But if you go to, Żabka's or McDonald's or, Carrefour's or other shopping centers where, where the retail establishment is involved in, offering that space and dedicating some thought to building out the market, they are there. Also in many rest stops and highway areas, I drive through Poland not infrequently and am often able to charge, along the main roads and in let's say larger shopping centers. And also, as GreenWay, we have charging stations. You can go to our app and look at the map there. You can see, they're in restaurants, in hotels all throughout the country. Ultimately, I mean, the key ratio, the key ratio as defined by the Commission is installed kilowatt hours per electric vehicle. Poland far exceeds the minimum standards there. Of course, it is a very large country. And so, if you are in Łódź, you care about where is the charging in Łódź. If you are, in Gdańsk, you care about where is the charging in Gdańsk. It doesn't matter if it's down in Warsaw. So, it's hard to say in every case, but I do think it is a common straw man argument to go to a place where there are no charging stations, say, voila, there's no charging stations here. No EV driver would be able to sustain themselves here. When, of course, in many places, an EV driver would go to the place where, in fact, they are charging stations. If they don't happen to have one of their own at home, if they don't have if they don't have their, own home and ability to charge there. And so, but in most communities that is possible. And, people are not driving so far, the 40 kilometers on average a day. So, a 1 or 2 charging sessions a week is more than enough for most people. And, ironically, in villages and rural areas where, many people have their own homes, are relatively easily able to install a home charger if they have an electric vehicle or want one. And whereas in cities and urban areas, it is maybe even harder to find one because there's more competition over a, finite number of charging spaces, right? Parking spaces where there are cars connected. So I would be happy to follow up with you if, in the specific example of the specific community. And, of course, the, Polish New Mobility Association has really good information on the situation in Poland. In fact, they put out a whole report last year looking at that. But, by all, let's say, national metrics, Poland is far exceeding the base of installed kilowatt hours per vehicle fleet. Already, but there are many places you could go and not find a charge. Many parking lots you could go to and still not find charging stations. And we hope that there are more vehicles come to then, and that we are not scaring off investment, so that we are able to deploy to those locations where there are not public, charging stations now to fill in those spots on the map. But happy to follow up with more specific detail if you want with specifics here.
Thanks, Aaron. And Christian from Hubject, you have a pretty good oversight, I guess, of charging infrastructure across Europe with your business. Is there anything you'd like to add to Aaron's comments to answer Patrick's question?
Sure, happy to do so. Thank you, Chris. Yeah, I think Aaron already highlighted it very much. Every market, every country is running in their own kind of velocity in regards of adopting charging infrastructure. But what we see in every case is that it normally starts with people who are living more in their own place, having their own house, having their own garage or parking lot, installing a wallbox, right? That's how charging normally works in early phases. But we also see that, and we mentioned this already, as soon as you reach a specific tipping point, the installation of public charging infrastructure, and again, Aaron shared great examples where we already see nowadays public charging infrastructure is starting to happen. And in a lot of European countries nowadays, you have a lot of choices, right? If you're going around on highways, every highway exit, you have, on average, 2 to 3 different operators you can choose from. So therefore, I think we exactly need to make this happen, right? To reach this tipping point that every European market becomes so relevant in regards of EV adoption that it makes sense for private companies to invest more and more into charging infrastructure. And again, even if you know that the adoption rate in European markets is very different in regards of EVs, but in general, we are still in an early phase. So whatever we're seeing nowadays, it's still a pioneering phase, and all pioneering approaches coming with their own challenges. So we do as well. But on the other hand, we also know the market is growing every day. And just to reflect a bit on the question before on the small EVs, I think for next year, I've seen now a lot of announcements that between 5 to 10 new EV models, which are costing less than 25,000 euros, are being announced for next year. So probably this topic is also being solved very soon, having more affordable EVs and a bigger choice as well. So I believe we really need to reflect a bit. We are in a pioneering phase, but to make it happen, to grow into a mass market environment, that's why we need the clarity, right? Otherwise, we will get stuck in the actual phase, and then we don't see more charging stations and more EVs going around.
Thanks, Christian. So I think that's answered your question well, Patrick. I received a question in advance. I think it was again from Asker News, and I'll ask it to our panelists as well. It's on the whole topic of technology neutrality. I think it's clear from everyone's statements that the speakers here are sort of investing and believing in electrification. But the question is there any chance to save combustion engines with hydrogen, e-fuels, and biofuels? Maybe, Marie, to go to you from Danfoss first, because you've said that electrification is your business. Some reflections from you about this question of electrification being the way forward or other technologies. And then Vanessa, I'm sure a Volvo perspective afterwards will be useful too. So Marie, would you like to come in on that question?
Yes, absolutely. Well, I think I also mentioned in the beginning that we are also in the business of hydrogen. So we don't see these competing with each other. But we know that green hydrogen production is very energy intensive and expensive, and the renewables needed to produce, they are not a free resource. So our clear position is that before deploying hydrogen, we must implement all available electrification and energy efficiency measures. So having said that, we have a lot of technologies that go into how we can produce it wisely where you need less electricity. Because I think the numbers is that by 2050, hydrogen production will require more than half of today's total electricity demand. So we need to be really careful how we use this limited resource. So use it wisely, and we say that it doesn't have a role to play on the roads. It can play a role in the very hard to abate sectors and in heavy transport. So that's our key stance on that, but we do see both things play a role in the green transition.
Super, that's a clear data-backed answer. And Vanessa, from a Volvo perspective, electrification versus other technologies for the combustion engine, would you like to come in on that?
Yeah, I mean, we see for sure that, other alternative fuels are interesting if you want to lower the emissions of the existing fleets and for other modes. But for passenger cars, we know that direct electrification is the most efficient solution, right? The best way we can do that. So, carbon fuels or carbon neutral fuels don't actually remove the tailpipe emissions and the pollutant emissions that go with them. So really for the automotive sector, we see that investments should go towards the most efficient solution. That is electrification. That's why we're going all in on that.
Thank you, Vanessa. Aaron, Christian, again, I don't see hands from your side, so I assume things have been covered by our other two speakers. Just a last call, if anyone would like to raise a question to our speakers, raise a hand. We have another one from Lorenzo, so Lorenzo, please come in.
Yeah, it's just a follow-up. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, just a follow-up concerning the last question. I understand that electrification is the most efficient way according to the industry, so the investments go there. But the question about the possibility to save the combustion engine by using possible alternatives to electrification, like biofuels, we know that they are not zero net yet, but I don't think if they will ever be. But there is hydrogen also. And I mean, the question is about the fact that there's already a big risk. I mean, a big risk. There is a certainty that thousands of jobs will be lost because of the end of the combustion engine. And so my question is there any possibility to develop better, for instance, the hydrogen technology, both for electric vehicles and combustion vehicles with hydrogen directly, in order to save thousands and thousands of jobs? I mean, it's just a question of innovation that has not been made, because all the attention is going to electrification, but isn't there a possibility to find other ways? And this is also the question of the technical neutrality by the technology neutrality by the Commission. I know this is a question that is important because of the criticism that is coming from many countries, including my own Italy, on the electrification path, seen as a sort of dictatorship of the electric. Thank you very much.
So is the transition to electric inevitable? Are there ways out to alternative internal combustion engine-based technologies? Vanessa, Murray, we heard a bit from you already. You're welcome to come in again, and the same for Aaron and for Christian, if you'd like to add to this question. Don't feel you have to, but would anyone like to answer and follow up on Lorenzo's question directly? Murray, please come in. And then Aaron.
Yes. Well, Lorenzo, I think it's very fair that you bring this up, because as you said, this is also the criticism coming from the other parts. And To be fair, electrification is here to stay, and whether Europe is part of this or not is a question of timing. And I don't think we are doing anyone a favor by delaying decisions here when it comes to electrification. We need to start to have that social dialogue within many different, and I know this works different in many different European countries on how it works with working councils and trade unions and so on. But we need to start having that conversation on how to move the skilled workforces to another skilled workforce, and how can we make that transition smooth. And the sooner we start, the better it will be, because the more time we have to do it. And we fully get this is not easy, and we fully get this is not only a tech transformation, this is a transformation of society, skills, and people, and habits, not at least. So, but we do not see this as doing anyone a favor by delaying decisions on a future that will come.
Hard truth to tackle now, not delay. Aaron, please come in as well.
Yeah, I might not directly answer your question, but there's an point I wanted to make. Look, I mean, I think hydrogen probably absolutely has a role to play in decarbonizing energy-intensive heavy industries, and maybe even some segment of the heavy-duty vehicle fleet. Hydrogen, that it can be, people can recharge or repower their hydrogen-fueled vehicle, as they're driving throughout Europe. That network doesn't exist, but it does exist with electricity. Electricity is ubiquitous. And it strikes me as we are at a, tech neutrality makes sense at a certain stage in the research and development process. But we are well past that point sorry, did I freeze? But we are well past that point in the rollout of electric vehicles, especially for light-duty vehicles. There is technology that is well tested, that is well proven, and now the point is to scale, deploy. That is the neat thing that we need to do right now. The goals have already been stated through hard negotiation. These have been, this pathway has been clear since 2009 at the European level, and we are at the point now where it's just about scale, and that is what is necessary in order to be competitive. And so I think we're past the point of talking about technological neutrality in the context of, light-duty vehicle drivetrains, and it is now about scaling. And as we said earlier, there's an entire ecosystem, not just those directly involved in vehicles and charging of vehicles, who also need to start to align, leasing companies, accountancy firms, repair shops, and others throughout the value chain who all need to, retail, who need to figure out how to incorporate, EV charging into their product portfolio and into their customer value proposition. And all of these sectors need to align. So what we need to have focus and really go towards the pathway of electric. The technology is there. It is well proven. There's 10 million electric vehicles, light-duty electric vehicles on European roads already. And now it is about dedication, focus, and deploy, so that the whole network can align around the direction of the market and provide that what customers need.
Thanks, Aaron. I see a question coming from Rebecca. I also see time is tight. We have 7 minutes left for this briefing, and I also want to give the floor to all of our speakers for some closing remarks. So, Rebecca, if you could ask a quick question, and then I'll ask for a quick answer from our speakers. Christian, I saw you also wanted to come in from that previous question, so I'll give you the floor first, and then we'll move to the wrap-up remarks. So, Rebecca, please.
Okay, sorry. Actually, I joined late, so I don't know if this was a point made before, but I'm just wondering if you have been speaking about the demand, the fact that there's not enough renewable electricity to even make these, renewable fuels and, hydrogen. In the EU, we haven't reached our renewable electricity goals for our electricity system. So how can we even make these renewable fuels in the first place for the car sector? And also, so it's more of a point, and just wondering if that's also being discussed, that even if we did switch to renewable fuels, there just isn't the capacity to make them in the EU.
Thanks, Rebecca. Yeah, I think Marie gave some good statistics, at least on the hydrogen side on this. You'll hear that back in the recording when it's sent around. Christian.
We're happy to share those as well, if you need them.
Perfect. Thanks, Marie. Christian, would you like to come in on that last point on anything before I move to the wrap-up remarks on the question that we were discussing on?
Yeah, happy to do so, Chris. Again, I will keep it short. I think just reflecting a bit on the question, I think we probably should also have another angle on this question. And the question is, isn't it already too late to protect a European industry based on combustion engines, because we see a lot of competition globally. And therefore, I think it's probably more the question, can we transform these jobs into new jobs which are focusing on a new industry like the EV industry, or will they get lost in total? I think that's probably more the angle we should come from. But and again, and probably also the colleague from Volvo can maybe share a bit more insight on this. But right now, a lot of OEMs are facing challenges because they are stuck between two worlds, right? They need to live in the old world with ICEs and need to live in the new world based on battery electric vehicles. And if this is being continued because we are adjusting our targets, I don't think that will help us. I think it makes things even worse, because you can never live well in two different worlds. You need to decide sooner or later, and I believe it's better to make this to continue the clear direction we already have in place than adjusting things again and creating more complexity.
Thank you, Christian, and thanks to journalists who have asked their questions. We're running to time. We have 4 minutes left. Before we go, I would just like to ask our questions to give, our speakers to give a one-line takeaway conclusion that you'd like to take away from this conversation regarding your company's views on the 2035 CO2 emissions goal and its certainty. So Vanessa, would you go first with your takeaway remark?
Sure, thank you. And thank you for this really interesting discussion. I just want to reiterate, electrification is the single most important action that the automotive industry can take to mitigate the worst effects of climate change. It's also critical for Europe's competitiveness. And I think you've heard different angles of that from all of us speaking here today about how we need to move into the future, not remain stuck in the past. So we're really at a pivotal moment of change, and the EU needs electrification to succeed.
Thank you, Vanessa. Aaron?
Yes, could not agree more with what Vanessa has already said. And look, I mean, there's a whole industry of e-mobility that is being developing, and even just EV charging is an entire sector. I think recent research projected our value to be 92 billion euros by 2035. In order to do that, though, we need to have clear signals. Our investors need clear signals. We need the ability to hire, to invest. The electricians and the mechanics who do the local work, as well as the software development, others who are creating new IT products and whatnot, to link the system together to really ensure that to create the jobs that we are already, creating and want to continue to create and roll out and that's just directly in EV charging. Doesn't even include the electricity grid side and with our network operator colleagues and whatnot. But it is EV charging is a key part of the overall electrification transition, creates a lot of value and jobs, but we need this clarity and certainty in order to do those things, which we are doing and would love to continue doing.
Marie, your takeaway conclusion.
Yeah, thanks again. I fully agree with all being said here, and thanks for having this very good questions as well. Thanks for that. Well, I'll stop by saying that we need the 3 C's that we always say in the green transition in Danfoss. We need the clarity, we need the commitment, and we need collaboration. And uncertainty is definitely the last thing we need, and it's really not an option here, because this train is rolling and EU cannot stop the progress. So electric cars, they're not just transport. We also need to think them as playing a bigger role as a cornerstone in a whole electric system. I think that also been mentioned quite a lot of times here with smart integration and flexibility. And then last but not least, because I think it's a very good question, that we also need to take into account in industry that it's not just about technologies, it's about people, skills, and transformation of society. But I do think we are fooling ourselves and the people in Europe if we think that we can stop this, and then we will end up with no jobs and production in EU if we don't keep up and stay on track on this.
Can I add, I like your 3 C's. I want you to add the 4th one being consumer, which you also mentioned at the end.
One, yeah. That's a really good one. Yeah, and affordability. I have some numbers from Denmark as well we can come back with if you need that. With the consumer.
Cost, and then you've got your 5th C as well. So Christian, we'll give you the closing remark.
Yeah, thank you. Happy to do so. Yeah, not that much to add. I think it's all clear that we need to continue the journey we all started already, right? It's an ask to make sure that we're not getting distracted on our way, because that only will increase the risk that either we're getting lost or someone else will overtake us. And I think that's exactly what we should avoid as a European market as well, to understand that this is a huge opportunity. Again, having a pole position in the global market as a European industry on EVs, including the whole ecosystem we discussed already. Otherwise, there's another topic we will need to hand over then to other regions. And again, I believe that this, from a political perspective, is so important more important than focusing on other technologies or anything else.
Thank you, Christian. Thanks to all speakers. Thanks to you as the audience for participating in this critical discussion. The recording of the session, as we've mentioned, will be available upon request. I think this topic will be covered a lot in the media over the next months too, and all of the companies who've spoken today are, I'm sure, available to answer individual requests for comment as we move forwards with that discussion, and ourselves too. We hope you found the session useful. We're happy to hear your feedback if you would like to share it. And as mentioned, if you want to continue the discussion with any of these speakers, let me know and we'll put you in touch. Have a great day, goodbye, and looking forward to the discussion continuing. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.